Hi everyone, this is Rebecca Betterbread, and I'm going to do the first of two videos for standard poodles. The first one's going to involve dogs that are at or around our breed average OI, so more mainstream lines, and the second will be inter variety breeding that has been run. And I'm going to also, in this video that you're watching, go to my dogs and talk about how I can use the results to line breed if I desire. So the first dog I'm going to search is Oak Ridge. I've got this feeling. You can just search a part of a name and it'll bring up all the dogs in our database with that name. So here he is. This is Cam. And we're going to go to his profile and talk about what each element means. And then we're going to do a test breeding with him. Okay, so here's his general information. You can see who are his sire and dam, his birth date, and this is Cam. He's very handsome and I believe close to his AKC championship right now. Okay, so you can see here are his DLA types. These two are the most typical, or some of the most typical for our breed, and they're always inherited together. So 2001 and 1001 will be inherited by statistically half of the puppies in a litter he produces, and the 2001 paired with 1003 will go to the other 50% statistically. Now, this won't necessarily happen, but that's simple Mendelian genetics. These numbers will not change generation to generation, and the only reason it's a number is that's how they chose to designate it, as opposed to, say, A, B, C, D. But these are indicative of a haplotype, which is a set of genes that travel together. So the next thing we're going to look at are these numbers will change from generation to generation and are just descriptors for each individual dog's genome genetics. So what do I mean by that? So the outlier index. I call it the outlier index of a breed, the pulse of a bottleneck in a breed. So the lower the breed average OI, the more likely that breed has a interbreed bottleneck. So in our breed, we have the second lowest, or our variety, but I'm going to talk about us like we're a breed, so you'll have to forgive me. In our variety, we have the second lowest OI of any tested breed yet. So the lowest is Dobermans, and we know they have a bottleneck. We are the next lowest at 0.24. Now, Cam is right around our breed average, which means he is just around what most standard poodles are. Now, remember, this does not mean a dog is good or bad. It's just a descriptor of what their genetics are and how we might use it to inform on our breeding decisions. Okay, so the next thing, AGR, this tells you how closely related the dog is to other dogs in our database. So what I say is the lower you get, the more breeding mates you have, because your dog will be less related to other dogs in our database, so you get more options. So he is a bit more related to other dogs in our database than is typical for our breed. So that means he will be less or more related to more dogs than is typical for our breed. So you'll see that down here. Okay, so IR. Now for him, this is great news. He is outbred, meaning a lot of his genes inherited from his sire and dam are not the same. Now, so how could he have a really low OI or IR but not have a really high OI? This is because we have more than one gene at each locus. That's very common for our breed. So while he could have genes that are typical for our breed, but they're different from one another at each locus. So that's good for him. He's outbred and more outbred than is typical for our breed. HL. This is a inbreeding measurement. Again, he is less inbred than the majority of our breed. And here you can see down here, as I said, the AGR was higher than what's typical for our breed, which means he is more related or is not unrelated to as many dogs as is typical for our breed. Now, all these measurements can take a while to get to understand, so watching these kinds of videos over and over again will help, and just give yourself time to understand what each one means. So again, he's right around our breed average for outlier index, which indicates that he has some bottleneck genetics, which every standard poodle will. The higher this number, the more you are breeding away from a bottleneck. And as we see in many breeds, the higher the breed average, the less breed-specific health issues we see. He's more related to dogs in the database than is typical for our breed, but he's more outbred than is typical for our breed, meaning he's not inbred. This also shows he's not inbred. Okay, so let's look at his health information. Now again, all this information up here does not tell you about the quality of a dog. We decide the quality of a dog through our health testing and our titling. So down to his health testing. He's OFA prelim good and has had quite a few genetic tests already. And here's his temperament. He's sweet, very trainable and biddable, high retrieve drive. I think he looks like quite a character from the pictures I've seen of him. Okay, and he's solid black. If you don't know who is his owner, you can go contact through our website and ask and inquire after dogs. Okay, so up here I'm going to go to breeding tools. Now I was offered, here you can compare one-on-one dogs to one another. That's a somewhat new feature on our website. But here I'm going to sort by genetic value to the breed, or OI, because in our breed/variety, we have a interbreed bottleneck. And so I breed for a higher OI in order to redistribute our genetic diversity, because we have a lot of genetic diversity in our breed, but it is disproportionately shared. So a lot of dogs share the same very typical genetics, and then there's just a few very atypical dogs. So here I'm going to go. I was offered any of Propert's Way's females, Mariah Propert. So I'm going to do a breeding with her and Cam and Weeb. So what I do is I select 3,000 puppies because it's pretty fast now to run them. And we're going to go through here what we see. So this is very first measure here is her outlier index. She's 0.28, which is a little bit higher than what our breed average is. It's not what we have called an outlier in the past, which is above 0.3, but it's still good because it's above our breed average, and we want to breed up above our breed average. She is outbred here with a negative 0.08, so she is also not highly inbred. I believe this is IR. Let me see up here. Oh no, this is average genetic relatedness. So she is not related to a lot of dogs in the database. Let's see if I can find her again. Where are you? Down here. Yeah. Okay. So she is very unrelated to dogs in our database, and she is not inbred or with an inbreeding score of 0. Now, this number here is about how closely related Cam and she are. Now, I don't really have a good feel for what the numbers mean, but we are on the category 10. Now, I tend to find that people focus on category 10 when they're advertising or talking about their litters. And that just means that they are as unrelated as they can be in our population, but does not mean that you are redistributing your genetic diversity. It just means that you'll be producing, for the most part, unrelated puppies. But the heterozygosity is not the whole story here, because we have a interbreed bottleneck and need to redistribute our genetic diversity. So it's important to say that category 10 is not the only thing that you should be looking at. Okay. So right now I'm pulling up their litter summary. You can also pull up litter analysis, which will give you a lot of detailed information, a lot more detail than the summary does, but I always pull up the summary because it's pretty and fun to look at. So here you can see, here's Cam's photo. I don't know why it wasn't showing up on this page for me. And then Jazz does not have a photo. So let's look at their outlier index first. Their average outlier index of this litter would be 0.26. Now our breed average is right around here, around 0.24. So you can see a good proportion of the puppies in this litter. So imagine all under the blue would be the percentage of puppies that will be in this litter. So it's maybe a third of the litter would fall below our breed average. So that means the other 2/3 of the litter, perhaps about, I can add up all these numbers and find out how many, but about 2/3 we'll say will fall above our breed average, which is good. So what I would recommend, since we're right just above our breed average, I would recommend testing the puppies and considering keeping ones that fall much higher above if they are equal. Or close to equal, because we as a variety or breed need to work on redistributing our genetic diversity, which will help our breed health in general. Okay, so here, as you see, here is their DLA types. None of the puppies will inherit homozygous DLA types, and we say when all else is equal in a breeding, try to breed for heterozygous DLA types. So this is good. Their average IR is at negative 0.01. And Dr. Peterson says at 0.15 is where you get pretty inbred, where a dog is barely inbred. So I've been recommending that people look to see how much of their litter will fall above that point, because then you're getting into really high inbreeding scores. And in standard poodles, a high inbreeding resulted in a high breeding amount increased your risk for SA. So we want to try to avoid SA. So you want to try to not produce puppies that are falling in that higher range for inbreeding. On the other hand, SA and AD were found to be much greater. You'd have much greater risk if you fell into what they called the genetic cluster, which is what OI gets at. We know the lower the OI, the more in the cluster, the higher the OI, the less in the cluster. So your risk is reduced by getting outside of a genetic bottleneck. So that's why we recommend that. So all in all, I say this breeding looks fairly good. The average IR is below 0, which is what we recommend, and the average OI goes above our breed average. But we want to go higher and higher. The higher we go as a breed, the more distributed we will be as a breed. Okay, so there's a breeding of Cam. So now I'm going to go up to my litters because I do tinker on my account. And we're going to talk about line breeding. Somebody suggested or requested a line breeding demonstration. So I'm going to go to my own dogs because they're the ones I know the best. And here you can see this is going to be the breeding I'll go over. Akira Seesaw Deeb for TRK9. I'm sorry, Tracker 9 maybe. We'll do that next video. Okay, Purport's Way, all that jazz is what we just did. And then here are two I'm going to talk about. So Shire's Everlasting is my bitch Shire, if you've seen pictures of her. She's an apricot. And Shire's Good Fortune is Puka, who's my naughty little puppy. So I'm looking at potentially line breeding her. And this boy, Shire's Down to Earth, is co-owned with Tasha. And he's a superstar, basically. And Shire's Good Fortune is the sister of this boy, his name is Wally, Puka and Wally. And Shire's Winged Wheel is the brother of Ever. So that's confusing, but these are basically the exact same breeding by pedigree. So we're looking at the exact same breeding if you were to pull up the pedigree. And if you want to know how this would be a line breeding, the dam of Ever is the grand dam of this boy. And same here. The grand dam of this girl is the dam of this boy. So that's a pretty tight line breeding. So I have actually been considering this because as we've discussed, I'm trying to raise my litter OIs and get outside the bottleneck. So I love the female soul. So this would be a very tight line breeding, but she's 8 and I have no health issues from her or any of her offspring as far as I know thus far. So I have been tinkering around with line breeding. So if we can just see the kind of just overall litter information here, you can see the DLA types for both are fairly good. These puppies here would be potentially homozygous for the most common for our breed here. This breeding would be heterozygous. However, if we look at the averages, the litter average here would be 0.31, so about the same to this litter, which is 0.32. But the average IR for this breeding with Puka, Shire's Good Fortune, and Gordy, Shire's Winged Wheel, the average IR is 0.08, which is really high, and I would not feel comfortable with a litter average that high unless I had to. Versus this one, my litter average IR is well below 0, which is what we recommend. So let's pull up this breeding and take a look. I believe I've only simulated 500 puppies, so let's simulate another 3,000 because why not? And then here, so you can also look at your dam and sires information. So dam Puka or Ever is 0.36, Wally is 0.3, and here Shire's Winged Wheel is 0.38, and my dam Puka is 0.27. I think she just recently dropped with our newest update. And she's pretty inbred. I knew that breeding was to my girl Imp. So we were talking about with Cam, his AGR was really high. Well, her dam's AGR was really, really high. It was 0.07, which means she's really related. And basically the only dogs that were unrelated to her were Intervariety, and her dam's personality would not mix well with a miniature because she's a higher drive female. So I had to choose a breeding that would be otherwise closer. So that was rambling a little bit, but here we're going to look at this summary. So again, this is a line breeding, and I don't know why his photo is not updating. Maybe I ran this a long time ago, but he looks more handsome in his most recent photo. But here's ever her face shot. So okay, so let's look at the average OI for this litter is 0.33, which is is zero point 0.1 above our breed average, which is one of my focuses for my breeding program. So as you can see, let's see how many will fall. A very low percentage will fall below our breed average. So for me, this is a yay. Most of my puppies will fall above our breed average, so that's exciting. Now the thing I have to look at, and see, this is so strange to me. So we talked about how tight a line breeding this is, but look how many are falling above 0.15. Not very many. So if I was incredibly daring, this would be a breeding I would consider, and I don't know, maybe I will in the future. Like I said, it's fairly close, but I like both the temperaments. I really like Wally, and I like the lines that they come from, obviously, because I'm on my 4th gen with him. So anyway, as suggested, this is an example of a line breeding that I would, if it was for somebody else, I would likely recommend it unless the pedigree risk behind them was contraindicated it. So if there's health issues behind both sides that match up, I would probably recommend not doing it because we have to consider everything that we always have in the past. All right. Well, this was my test breedings for today. Thank you for watching, and if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you.